watching the It's Her Time podcast with Cody and Jess. Hi, welcome back to the It's Her Time podcast. My name is Cody Sanders, and I'm a holistic health practitioner and functional nutritionist and the host of the show. Now, on today's show, I'm so excited because we have a very special guest that I have wanted to invite on for a very long time. Her name is Dr. Caroline Leaf. She is a world-renowned communication pathologist and cognitive neuroscientist who wrote one of my favorite books called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. Now, on today's episode, Dr. Leaf dives deep into how to properly manage our mind and our thinking habits and how that can shape our brain, our hormones, and even our DNA in a positive way. It's such an empowering episode that helps us to understand that our mind and our brain are separate, and we have the ability to manage our minds instead of allowing our minds to manage us. But before we dive into this episode, let's join Jess for a Mixhers Girls Say.
On today's Mixhers Girls Say, I actually get to share a little bit about an experience we had where we attended a conference called Accelerate, and I was actually able to speak at this conference. The reason why I wanted to talk about this a little bit today on our Mixhers Girls Say is I was asked to speak about kind of the unique culture that Mixhers has created and what we feel like contributes to that. But also I was able to talk about vulnerability in the workplace. And I wanted to bring this up here because I'm sure that so many of you have careers and you do have daily jobs that you make your way to and you're trying to survive this career path that you're on. But also, I know that so many of you have roles where whether it's a job or not, it is something that you have responsibilities to. And oftentimes you feel like you just have to push forward, be tough, never have anything get to you, have it all together all the time, and have all the answers all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just not possible. And so what I wanted to talk about and what I did get to talk about is just how at Mixhers, we find it so beautiful when people are open about needing help, needing support, needing to ask questions. That's what we really try to cultivate here in the workplace because oftentimes people are insecure about not having a solution right at the tip of their fingers with every question that comes towards them. And actually, we find it so amazing when people are willing to learn, willing to open up about needing additional support, needing to lean into others to find solutions. And I have found that that is so helpful in friendships. It's so helpful in family relationships. It's so easy to fall into these patterns of even being the friend that has to feel like, if I let anyone know that I'm struggling so much with these 3 things in my life and I'm buried underneath this, people are going to think I'm a failure. When in fact, it opens up an opportunity for connection.
Yeah, totally.
And what Cody and I both agree on also is we're not trying to normalize this because we want people to think that, oh, if it's a sob fest, then that's when you connect. No, it's more about reality and knowing that we all have wins. We all have areas that are going well, moving easily. We're finding progress at the same time as trying to navigate challenges.
Totally.
And
yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it's about being perfectly imperfect. That's what we want to celebrate, and that's something we try to cultivate in our own lives, but especially at Mixhers. And just like Jess said, we just love it when women don't just try to put on a front, like they have it all together. And I know that we see that on social media. We see that, we see all the pretty, but it's so much better when you can just be real and just be honest about, this is what I'm trying to do. These are the wins in my life, but also I could use support in these areas and then collaborate, with each other. And I feel like when you have that kind of environment, everybody thrives.
And it's so beautiful when you're able to be extended grace and women are able to share, I'm struggling in this area also, and ways that you can support each other. Also, I feel like if you're running in a circle of people that you truly feel completely unsafe with being real with, or if you're in a workplace where you are just feeling like you're handled like a robot with zero emotions and it's just highest performance every single day, I would suggest changing your circles that are surrounding you because it's not sustainable.
It's not healthy.
It's not healthy.
Nope.
And it's not real. And so just know that you have impact in all of your roles and all of your areas, in your homes, in your friend circles, in the workplace, in your other responsibilities. You have the ability to be someone that is vulnerable and allow for that safety in your circles. So
I love it. Yep.
Well, thanks for coming and watching me.
You killed it.
You're so nice.
No,
Cody always shows up.
I'm your biggest fan. I love you. No, you just are such a great speaker. You're real, even in those moments. Like, I just love it. You make the audience just feel like they can connect with you so easily because you don't just go up there and put on a front. It's true. It's real. They see the emotion. You're honest with your thoughts, and it's really refreshing. So,
well, I think it's funny too. Like, even in these business conferences, it's heavily male dominant.
Yep.
But me being asked to speak about something completely different than you would necessarily find in a business conference, it was amazing to have so many conversations with men afterwards that were expressing like gratitude about even saying this isn't something that should be just a Mixhers thing. This should be normalized in all workplaces. Mm-hmm. But like, that's it for men in their lives as well and all their responsibilities as well. Mm-hmm. Men need to be able to kind of offload the pressure too. So
change the culture. Yeah. I heard a lot from people too, a lot of men after you spoke, that it was just so refreshing. So all right. We all could use more realness, right?
Yeah.
And so, way to go, Jess.
That's good. She's so nice. Let's get into the episode. Mixhers is a company made for women by women. Each of our products have been carefully and lovingly crafted to support you in all stages of your life, providing you with the optimal health you deserve. Each ingredient we handpick is 100% all natural, backed by science, and chosen specifically to better your life physically, mentally, and hormonally. Each product empowers your body to take charge of its monthly hormonal shift and flows, empowering you to live life to the fullest. Let Mixhers take care of your needs from sunup to sundown, and you take care of the rest. Check us out at mixhers.com, Mixhers.
Dr. Leaf, Caroline, it's so good to have you on the show. I know that I've been wanting you to be a guest on this show for quite some time. I've been a big fan of yours for years. I've read your books. I've used your app. And I enjoyed the time I got to spend with you, getting to know you and your cute husband a little bit better last fall when we both spoke at the Demi Tebow event. But I want you to say hi to our audience and tell us just a little bit about yourself.
Cody, it was so great meeting you at the conference. I just absolutely loved chatting with you, and it was a great, fun conference. And I love the Mixhers. I tell you, I still use them every day. So thank you. That's a great product, and you've done a great job there. Well, I'm a clinical neuroscientist and communication pathologist and audiologist, specializing in the field of psychoneurobiology. So that's a big mouthful. What that really means is that in simple terms, I studied the whole mind-brain-body connection. So looking at the difference between the mind and the brain, and then how we can help people to rewire networks if they've had any kind of brain damage, like from a trauma or cancer or brain tumors or something like that, learning disabilities, dementias, that sort of thing. And then also on the other side, dealing with the traumas of life and dealing with bad habits and dealing with day-to-day struggles. So it covers the spectrum, because the more I delved into what mind was, the more I understood about how we need mind management. So I practiced clinically for 25 years. I don't practice anymore now. I write books. I did 19 and this is my 19th, but I've got 18 in 24 languages. We have the app, as you mentioned, the Neurocycle app, because I can reach a few thousand people in my practice, but I can reach millions, helping them with their mind through our mental health technology platform, which is the Neurocycle app, and the books and so on. So that's what I do now and speak at conferences. And our whole focus is to try and empower people and help them to understand the mind and to understand not just the self-help empowerment, optimization, blah, blah, blah. It's so much more. It's that to be human. To be human is to struggle. And to struggle means we're dealing with all kinds of things all the time, and day-to-day crises, big ones, small ones, little ones. We've got bad habits. We've got chaos. We're all a little bit crazy. We're all a mental mess. We all need help with our mind. And so I believe that that's a big focus of my work, is to help everyone, as well as helping in the more specialized cases like traumas and brain damage and so on.
Well, that covers like all of us, right? So I know that the mind is so powerful, and I love having guests on like you because the mind and our mindset and the way that we perceive our lives and the way that we handle stress has such a trickle down effect on how it affects our hormones. And so this podcast, obviously we focus a lot on women's hormonal health, but we have to look at all areas of health in order to make sure that our hormones are going to be right where we need them to be. So I'm excited. You know, the things that you teach are amazing, and you have such a gift for communicating in a way that is easy for us to grasp and to understand. And I love the tips that I've learned from you. I know I first became familiar with you a few years ago during COVID, and I was listening to your book, you know, Mind Your Mental Mess. And I then got your Neurocycles app and went through that. And it was tremendously helpful because that was a time that not only just going through the pandemic was a little stressful, it was like there was a lot of things that were going on in my life that I needed that little extra support and guidance. And so I really loved turning, you know, to some of the things that you teach. And so that's what I want to share today is kind of dive in and give some of these tips and tools to our listeners, because I know that they are so powerful.
Well, thank you for that. No, that was, I actually wrote the Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. I wrote at the beginning of COVID, and then we released it. I think it was sort of 18 months into COVID. So yeah, that was it. I didn't know when I wrote that book how necessary it would be. You know, even more necessary than what it really is. Well, because mental health has had it's been such a interesting arc, but also a messy arc, the whole concept. And, you know, if you think about it, from the beginning of time, humans have battled. We've had adverse experiences and of all different scales, and we respond and we react and we try and cope, and we battle and we don't battle and we do battle. And, you know, so it's not something new. And I think what's really concerns me a lot, Cody, is in the current model, it's the biomedical model. It's very focused on taking a person's entire sort of experience and siloing it into a diagnosis. And a diagnosis implies there's an underlying biological cause, like something wrong with your brain or your genes or something like that. And, you know, if that was a successful model, then we wouldn't have worse mental health problems. But as we all know, it's on the rise. And yes, we blame social media and we blame the COVID pandemic and whatever. But, you know, the fact is that every generation is facing something. So, you know, what about the wars? What about there's been financial crises. There's been every generation is facing something. So it's not like, I think we've almost blown a little bit, you know, not that I'm saying that COVID didn't affect us. Everything affects us. But to say that this generation's got it worse than others is a typical thing that generational trends happen. What I prefer to do is to try and help people understand that as humans, we've always gone through stuff, and that we face unique crises. And what we have to do is learn to manage what our generation is throwing at us. And what our generation is currently throwing at us is our most recent pandemic and the technological age, which has been just, you know, growing in leaps and bounds. And pandemics are going to happen. Technological change is going to happen. You know, when TV first started, radio and flight, I mean, everyone thought, oh, wow, you know, it's going to change the world. And it does. And change is good. I think what has happened in this generation is that's led to an increase in a lot of the mental health issues is a couple of things. And the first is that we have got to, when change happens, we have to keep up with, we have to also have change in how we manage that change. And if a gap occurs between the changes and how we're managing the changes, that's going to be problematic. And I think the speed at which technology has advanced and social media and the impact of the internet and that kind of thing, we've got so, and AI and everything now, we've got so consumed with the power that it brings, and it satisfies such a deep need in humans to be connected, to get knowledge, to get information, to be curious. It's created such a satisfaction for that need that we've almost fired ahead without saying, okay, this is what's happening. Let's make sure that we manage what's happening. And that hasn't happened. So there's a big gap, I believe, between the beautiful technology we have that is so good and how it's being managed. So anything good that's managed wrong is a problem. And as we know, you go on social media too much, the little bursts of information take away your need for, well, not take away your need, but impact how you think deeply and creatively and critically about information. And that's not good because that downscales the whole network of your mind, brain, and body, and you don't function as well. And you become more reactive and impulsive and increase in unmanaged mental health problems and that kind of thing. Whereas if we manage the technology, it will be an aid to us, not a disadvantage to us. So that's a huge part of it, teaching ourselves to manage our technology, helping our children to manage our technology. It's not going away. And, the more you say, don't, put your cell phone down, this kind of thing, as soon as you give rules to something, people won't do it. We know from the prohibition and all those things, it just doesn't work. What we have to do is say, this is beautiful, this is amazing. What does it mean in my life? How are we going to regulate it? How are we going to close this gap? What is it? And spend as much time on both. And that's where I think there's a big gap. So that's the one thing that I think has contributed a lot to our mental health issues. Obviously, COVID created, the fear and the isolation was, we need deep, meaningful connection. We all know that was a big problem and how it affected kids with education. So we've got years of catching up to do, but we can, because whenever humans are faced with major issues, that brings out the best of us too. And we innovate and we create and grow. So I think we're going to grow beautifully out of this. And there's already evidence of that happening. There's so much more awareness of isolation and so much more awareness of deep, meaningful connection. And then a third major area that's contributed to the mental health crisis is one of the biomedical model that I briefly mentioned. And the biomedical model is about 50 years old, a little bit older, and it's basically takes our human experiences and equates them to a medical disease like cardiovascular disease or diabetes or something like that. And there's such a vast difference between the two, because cardiovascular disease or diabetes, there's tests to identify the symptoms. The symptoms have been well studied. We can track them back to an underlying biological cause, and treatments are fairly focused, and we're advancing treatments quite rapidly. And that works. It's working, and it's going to keep improving. It's a wonderful model when it comes to the physical brain and body. But when it comes to the mind, Cody, that doesn't work very well, because the mind is not the brain. It's not the body. So you can't apply the same laws. It is a different entity. And even though it works with the brain and the body, and it drives the brain and the body, and it needs the brain and the body, it's three different things. And so therefore, when we apply a rule to one type of thing that works and then assume it's going to apply to something that's completely different, it doesn't work. The most simple example of that is saying that the kind of rules that you give yourself, or the kind of constraints you put on yourself as an adult, are very different to that what you'd put on a child, or the expectations you have of an adult is very different to that of a child. So you can't apply blanket approaches to anything in life. You have to be very specific. You can't, if you've got more than one child, you've got to parent them differently. There's all these things. But somehow when it comes to mental health, it's been lumped under the biomedical model, which is nice and convenient and clean and measurable and all that kind of thing. But as I said, if it worked, we would have had less problems, but we've actually got worse problems. So what we see now, fast forward all these years, from bunch of research that's been done, including mine, is that people are dying 8 to 25 years younger from preventable lifestyle diseases, and that mental health is worse, and it's a pandemic and a problem, and blah, blah, blah. And that's, you've got this whole thing that it's an illness, and the diagnosis implication is that, oh, well, it's an illness, and depression and anxiety and behavioral issues are symptoms of a disease because it's an illness. So it's all been lumped and mixed up. Meanwhile, if someone's been abused, or if someone just lost a loved one, or if someone's been traumatized in a marriage, or going through some brutal experience in war, that's not something wrong with the brain if they have symptoms of PTSD and behavioral symptoms. I rather say behavioral symptoms of PTSD and anxiety and depression, and maybe irritation, and maybe even psychosis. Those are not symptoms of a disease. Those are basically manifestations and signals of our mind working with our brain and our body, trying to cope with an adverse experience. So they're pretty much normal responses to abnormal circumstances. And if we treat them as a disease of the brain, we miss the plot. Yes, the brain is going to change, and I know I'm speaking for a long time, and we can talk about mind and brain and all that stuff.
Keep going. Yeah, I love it. It's fascinating.
But essentially, we can't just think that the brain caused it, because then you take that huge PTSD experience or that huge whatever, or that bad habit that we've developed. We've all got bad habits that we develop. And you just lump it under, oh my goodness, it's a disease. So that misses the whole story. It takes everything, all the context away, and silos it into what appears initially as a gift. Mm-hmm. Because, oh, wow, this is why my child's doing this. This is why I'm feeling like this. It's nice. And initially, it's great to have a label, a description. It makes you feel comfortable. But it's a gift that's empty. As soon as you open it, there's nothing inside. What next? It increases stigma. It makes you feel worse. You generally get a drug, which they consider medications, but it's a drug because it changes the brain, so it's psychoactive. Then that suppresses your emotions for a time, so you feel a little better for a time, but you haven't dealt with the issue. So it's a Band-Aid. And it's a Band-Aid with a lot of consequences. And yes, there's talk therapy, and there's CBT, and all these things which are fantastic that people are doing. But we've also got to make sure that we're doing them in the sense of not saying that your brain is broken, but that, we're trying to find why and helping people to move forward and all that sort of thing. And so we've kind of got things mixed up and muddled up. And that's why we're sitting with a problem in mismanagement of mental health, which has created the pandemic. Not so much the pandemic in mental health, not that there's an increase in disease of mental health. It's an increase in mismanagement that's led to more problems. That's a long answer.
I love it. I love it. You just laid down so much wisdom right then. And I hope that everybody was following along with what you're saying. I think you just did such a beautiful job. I think that it's a very positive mindset to have about all of this as well. And I'm a holistic health practitioner. My training is to look for root causes. And so that's exactly what you are describing here, is not just finding a diagnosis and treating symptoms, but instead digging a little deeper to understand why. And so that is so fascinating. I love how you pointed out that the brain and the mind are different. And I think this is kind of this might be a new way of thinking for a lot of our listeners today. And so I want to dive into that. And I also want to understand too about what it is that we can do when we are maybe going through depression or having feelings of anxiety, or we are experiencing some traumatic events and things like that. I think what you're telling us is that our mind is adaptable and that we can actually get through these challenges that we might be facing, but we might come out of it on the better side, And so I would love for us to dive into, rewiring the brain and how that all, plays into this.
Absolutely. Well, you say you're a holistic practitioner, which I know, and that's so great. And you talk about hormones a lot on this podcast, and we talk about the impact, and you talk about finding the root cause. Well, psychoneurobiology falls in that realm, and that's what my field of study. So psycho means mind, neuro, brain, body, biology. And your hormones are directly impacted. Every part of your body is directly impacted by your mindset, which is what you talk a lot about on this in your podcast. And it's related to a lot of the work that I do. Sorry, I dropped something there. And so essentially, how does this work? How does, for example, your mindset impact your hormones? And as women, how does that work? So taking from, your content of your podcast, I can explain mind and brain. Okay, so basically the mind, brain, body debate has been going on for thousands of years. And in the last 40 odd years, it's, as I said, 40, 50 years with the biomedical model. And as we've learned more about the brain, we've become very focused on the brain. So the dominant kind of speak in media and social media, and most psychiatrists and people in this field that you hear talking, they'll talk about the brain producing the mind. So that the brain is like the source and the it and the everything about our human experience. It's all coming from the brain. The brain generates. But there's a very simple way to see that is illogical. And that is, if someone dies, the brain disintegrates immediately. It's not going to, no matter what you do, it will not produce anything. So there's a life force that is making the brain do stuff. Also, the brain's connected to the body, and the brain can't work without the body, and vice versa. So you as being a holistic practitioner understand that hormone system is not just in the brain; it's the entire body that it's running. And so every part, the heart's not just the heart. making the blood pump. It generates an electromagnetic field and hormones that are related to peace and whatever. And every system of your body, your immune system in your brain, for example, is responding to a toxic issue in exactly the same way as it would respond to something like a COVID virus. So the minute that your body gets invaded with, whether it's a physical virus or something that upsets your hormone balance, well, let me start it this way. The minute that your brain and body get invaded by a virus, that in your immune system of your brain and your body will treat that in exactly the same way as it would treat a physical thought of an experience. There's no distinction because both become physical inside the brain and the body. So the mind is different from the brain and different from the body. And they work as a three-part thing. And there's a lot of move I don't know, I won't go into too much of the history, but very briefly, Descartes was one of the first people to talk about the mind-brain split. And he did that because he had a whole discussion with the Pope at the time. And there's this whole thing, you can't cut up bodies because they are spiritual and it's sacrilegious. So they agree between the two of them that this mind is not in the body, that the body and brain are separate. And that gave Descartes the permission to explore, to study, which is interesting, a little bit of a summary of history. But prior to that, people were exploring already, and there's still this debate going on. But the fact that we can't even debate this, Cody, the fact that we can have this discussion, that's evidence of mind. The fact that you're different to me and every person listening is different, that is mind. Mind is you, your aliveness, this unique Codiness, Carolineness, whatever it is. It's the thing that makes us who we are, and it's encapsulated in the mind. And the mind drives the neurophysiology and it drives the mental function. So if you want a definition of what mind is, it's on two levels we can define it. On one level, we can define it as a biofield, using physics. We can talk about electromagnetic light fields. We can talk about quantum physics. We can talk about gravitational fields, because all of that, when you're alive, that's what we pick up in your blood. When we do an EKG and a QEEG, we're picking up energy. It's not anything weird. This is pure hardcore medical science and physics and so on. But when someone's dead, that all goes. So there's a life force that can be picked up by all this equipment that we use in the medical and research field, MRIs, fMRIs, etc. And then also we can see what's happening in the body and the blood and the hormones. The fact that your hormones are changing is because of your mind. The fact that if you're dead, your hormones do nothing. So the mind is driving all this neurophysiology. It's also the part that's enabling you and I to have this conversation and the listeners to understand us and to experience a walk on the beach and sunsets and a conference and love and hate and up and down and grief. That's all mind. So mind has got the mental and physiological aspects, and it drives brain and body. So how they live together, an easy analogy is to imagine, to think of the sky. Now, the sky is all around us. If you stand outside, it doesn't really start or end anywhere. It's kind of all around you. You're immersed in sky. And then we have clouds in the sky. So the sky can be the equivalent of mind. It's all around you everywhere. And it's a force, an energy force that helps to create, for example, clouds. And clouds could be the equivalent of a thought. And if you think of a cloud as made of drops of rain, and they're clustered together, a thought is made of drops of memory. So imagine like this conversation is a thought about mental health, but it is made up of lots of words that you and I are saying that have meaning, that become meaningful sentences. So those are all the drops in the cloud. So all our exchange are the memories, the details, the data, the drops of the cloud, forming a cloud. So we are all growing with our mind a cloud of this conversation. And whatever else you did today are different clouds. So the mind is this force that enables us to process life into this pattern. And in that pattern, because you can't express yourself if you're just a cloud or the sky, or you're just a gravitational field. So therefore, we have this beautiful relationship with the brain and the body, this complex brain and body that has to be complex because the mind is so complex. So that energy force, that cloud, is literally put into the brain and the body and changes the structure of the brain and the body, which is plasticity, neuroplasticity in the brain and plasticity in the body. So as we're speaking now, the cloud forms, which is our mind makes the cloud, and then our mind puts that cloud in the brain. It will obviously all happen very fast, and that stimulates the formation of proteins and things, and then that creates a tree-like structure. So we grow a cloud in the sky, we grow a tree-like structure in the brain. So you've got a little tree behind you, a plant behind you over there. So visualize a with roots and leaves and all that kind of thing. You saw me use them on the stage. I used my little trees and things.
I love it.
And they work really well. Actually, I should have brought them into this podcast. They kept in my other office. Apologies for that. But essentially, and also at the same time as it's building this collective memory of all this content in the brain, it also builds it into the body. So every single part of your body will also store what we're discussing. Every experience you have from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep is going into clouds and into your trees in your brain, and it's going into every cell of your body in a hedge-like structure inside the depth of your cells, and I won't go into that detail. But essentially, we have 37 to 100 trillion cells collectively in our brain and our body, and we're building memories of all of that. So what does this mean in terms of hormones and life and mind and application and practicality? Is that life becomes part of your network, and your network is this pattern around you, this energy around you that has all these patterns of life experiences. All those patterns around and through us are driving our hormone system, our heart, etc. And also those patterns go into the brain and become physical, hardcore protein tree-like structures in the brain. And then they become these little hedges that cluster together, that work with the brain, thought in the brain, and give you different perspectives. So this conversation in your brain would have the whole collective experience and in the cloud, but in your body, your heart would have a perspective. Your lungs would have your systems, your cardiovascular system, your immune system, your hormonal system, each would have its own memory collective, a portion of the memory that's a perspective that's fed into the brain. So the network is mind, brain, and body. Now, the more you think about something, the more that network grows and the stronger it gets. Think of trees getting bigger. Think of roots getting deeper. Think of hedges getting stronger and bigger. Think of clouds getting filled with rain. And then the connection between them getting stronger. So the more I focus on something, the more I practice something, the more I learn something, the more I turn it into a habit, and the more it then drives me. So whatever you say and do is not some random event. Everything you say and do is coming from thoughts you build. I can talk about this stuff because I've spent years building it. So I've got these very strong networks for this information. Each of us has our own experience. If you have a trauma, same thing. Stuff I'm talking about now, this is a healthy network because it's knowledge that is helping me and other people. That if I have a trauma, it makes a big impact that I don't deal with. It's also going to grow bigger and bigger, and it's also going to drive me. This knowledge will drive me in the right direction where it will help people, and I'll develop good books and blah, blah, blah. You'll use your knowledge to help people holistically and create more mixes and help people in this podcast. But if we have traumas, which we will do, and we don't deal with them, those also drive us. And maybe they're affecting our self-confidence or imposter syndrome or relationships or addiction patterns start developing and so on and so on. So on a practical level, what we need to realize is that our mind is our best friend. And our mind has different levels. Our mind has the conscious level, which we are aware of now. You're consciously aware. It also has a very big, huge, enormously massive non-conscious, non-conscious. And that's pure intelligence, pure, deep spiritual intelligence that's totally on your side, where everything goes in of life. Your experiences, things you focus on and things you don't focus on. A lot of the bad stuff it neutralizes. But the stuff that you've consciously built into your brain, that stuff, if we don't deal with it, it's going to impact how we function. So if it's good stuff, great. We want it to impact how we function. So I want to keep building my knowledge and you want to keep building your knowledge. But if it's a trauma, if it's a bad habit and we don't deal with it, it pops up and we reinforce the habit by doing it again. We reinforce the suppressed trauma by letting it influence another area of our life. And then it goes back even stronger than before. And it comes up and there's another level of addiction or another level of bad habit. And so those just drive us more and more in the wrong direction. So your non-conscious works in this beautiful way. It searches and finds what's the most disruptive to you in this current moment, and it finds what's the most beneficial to you in this moment. And then it sends signals through the subconscious. And the subconscious is like a doctor's waiting room. The things that are urgent are being rushed through emergencies. Then you have people registering, so it's not so urgent. It's going to have to be dealt with at some point. And then there's the people waiting. Those are like next in the queue after the emergency. So that's what happens with the things we need to deal with, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And they come through into the conscious mind during the course of the day, often triggered by things, by events and situations, by how we're behaving, showing up at work, because thoughts come alive. And those things that are in the waiting room that are disruptive to our functioning, those will come through into the conscious mind in this way, like being pushed through the emergency room. And if there's something I want to stress that's also the good stuff, because if there's something good, we want to focus on that. If you have a great conversation, like this conversation, if you have a great time with your family at a special event or something like that, and those memories come back and make you smile. You want to spend a few seconds on those. As you recall those, you don't want to just think, oh, and then passing by. You want to actually spend a bit of time, because those activate resilience. We have unlimited resilience. And we don't always feel like that when we're in a chaos situation or a crisis. But if we learn to listen to the signals of the good stuff, it will help with resilience when the bad times come. Doesn't mean that you're not going to not cry, because all emotions are good and all emotions are helping you process and so on. But at least you've got more resilience building in the background. The ones that are the toxic ones, we need to listen to those signals. So it's not that difficult, because when something comes through, think of an emergency room. It's very obvious that that patient needs help. There's signals that the patient's giving off. They're screaming, they're not passed out, they're bleeding. There's very obvious signals. In the same way a thought has obvious signals. It has emotional warning signals or emotions. It has behavioral symptoms, like maybe emotions, depression, anxiety, you mentioned earlier on. Maybe behavioral symptoms, withdrawing or irritable or more angry outbursts, bodily sensations, everything stored in the body as well, like I explained. So maybe you're having more heart palpitations or gut issues. Perspective, maybe life sucks, how you're looking at life. And so the thought that comes up has these signals. And if we focus on those, which is mind management, we can then start to self-regulate. We can recognize, oh, hey, this is not who I am. I'm showing up like this because of something that's going on in my life. This is not who I am, but there's something going on. So instead of running from it, suppressing it and all those bad things because it'll explode, we rather then take those signals and allocate a time to work on them. You may not have time at the moment. You may be driving your car. You may be in a meeting. You may be at dinner with friends. So you just make a mental note, maybe put it in your phone, write it on a napkin, whatever, and then allocate a time where you sit down and you start to pay attention to those and say, okay, these are these signals. What are they linked to? Because signals are attached to thoughts of the clouds, trees. And those thoughts, if you think of a tree structure, the branches are how you're showing up in life. It's the detail. What are you saying? What are you doing? Self-talk, the relation, whatever related to that particular concept. So if it's maybe that depression thing that we gave that example earlier, maybe there's a general pervasive pattern in your life of feeling this kind of almost this depression nagging at you and angry outbursts and this sort of pressure in your heart and this perspective. And you notice that this is not just now and then, it's maybe happening 5 or 6 or 7 times a day. So you notice, okay, these signals are telling me something. There's a pattern going on here. So I need to, gather awareness of this, and I need to actually reflect, why? What does this mean? And then I need to maybe do a bit of more of a mindstorm and go a little deeper and then think, okay, well, I can think I'm starting to see where this is coming from. I'm not sure yet, but I think it's something's happening, or this is what's going on. What can I do about it today in this moment? And then create some sort of, okay, I can do this today or that today, some sort of an action. So it's a 5-step process that we go through, and that's called the Neurocycle. And the Neurocycle doesn't replace any technique out there. You can use meditation, CBT, all the wonderful things that we can do to help us with our mental health. You use those, but if you don't use them in the correct system, and by system I mean how the mind-brain-body network actually works, then there'll be Band-Aids. They're all good, but used in the wrong way, they become a Band-Aid. So drinking that green juice, doing that exercise, doing that meditation, doing that breathing, doing that visualization, all of them, having that ice bath, or whatever it is that you're doing a little bit of journaling, all of them are good, excellent. But if you don't use them correctly, they're Band-Aids, and they can make things worse. So the research shows if we meditate without processing what we meditate, we get worse and all that kind of stuff. So the Neurocycle is a system that, and I call it Neurocycle because you're cycling, and it's something that we do. It's how our mind drives our network, our mind and body network. And it basically is a system of how we function. And what I've done is taken this complex scientific system and made it a simple 5-step process. I've made the non-conscious conscious so that you can deliberately learn to help sort yourself out. And so the Neurocycle is how we look at the signal, find the thought that it's attached to, deconstruct to get to the root. Recognize that the root is always going to be there. Whatever's happened to you is never going away. Your stories will always be with you, okay? But you can change how they play out into your future. You can change, because if that's happened, now I can't change what's happened, but I can change the impact it's having in my life. I can reconstruct. So I can't rip the tree out, but I can break the toxicity down, put some plant food on the roots, and I can reconstruct and change how it plays out into my future. And that process is pretty much habit formation, takes time, and it takes what I've done with my research is how long does it take to find a signal and do all this? It takes around 63 days minimum. That's the minimum time frame, 9 weeks, that we need to daily, and you work daily for around anything from 15 to 30 minutes for the first 21 days. And then for the second 42 days, you work for around 5 to 10 minutes. And you're doing that neurocycle, which is taking your mind, your wise mind, is guiding your messy mind through this process to help you to today, little bit at a time. You don't solve it in one day, little bit at a time as you work through the process. And then you get to, little bit at a time, you eventually get to the point in the first 21 days where we deconstruct and reconstruct. Now, if you stop there, think of it as being a small little tree in amongst millions of other trees, because all those trees are your experiences, your thoughts that have happened to you. If that's only the size, and it's still got the toxic part almost the same size because you've only just done 21 days. It's not enough to take the energy away and make the toxic thought go away. You have to make that smaller and you have to make the tree bigger. And that's why you need the extra 42 days minimum where you now practice using. It's this what we call stabilization. So the first thing is find the signal, deconstruct, reconstruct. Now that's the first more or less 3 weeks. Hard work, up and down, emotions are up and down, all emotions are good, they're just telling you something, and then you want to stabilize and practice that. And that's the other 42 days. And that's what the Neurocycle that you mentioned does. It's in the book, it's in the app. The app, I walk you through it, and there's all kinds of those meditation type activities that done in the right place that can help you. Gosh, Cody, I've spoken so much. Did that answer your question?
It did. And I loved it. The way that you teach, it's so visual. And that's what I've loved. I love that you described, the clouds and the trees and the roots. And I just want to just reemphasize exactly what you're saying is that everything is connected. And if you are somebody that's suffering with, say, hormonal imbalance, which is what brings a lot of you to this podcast, know that everything is connected. The thoughts that you're taking in, the way you perceive these thoughts are then being trickled down and affecting every cell in the body. And so I love how you described that. And I also just love how you talk about that these steps and these good practices that we can implement in our life are very powerful. But with the science that you've done, all of the research that you've done, people that are listening today, audience that's listening today, I just want you to know Caroline is the person that is the expert in this field. She's done a ton of research. She's written several books. And to have the science to back up the process in which this happens. I think that was something that I learned most when I was following your program was that I was kind of like throwing spaghetti at a wall with all of these really good, practices. And yes, they were helpful and beneficial, but I didn't feel that I was improving, that I wasn't making the progress that I was hoping for until I started putting these practices in the proper order. And so I appreciate that you walked us through kind of what that order looks like. And I appreciate also that there is a beautiful app that's out there and a book for our audience to go to. Like I said, I went through this myself, and there is a lot of work that you're doing, but it's being put in little manageable steps. And it's something I actually ended up looking forward to doing every single day. And so I just really encourage our audience members to go and check this out. And of course, I'm going to put all of the information in our show notes on how you can, connect with Caroline and how you can take advantage of all of this amazing research and the way that she teaches about it to use in your own life, because you're right. There's not one of us that's listening today that's going to escape trauma, that's going to, have this life that just, nothing happens to us. It's all about experiencing all the ups and the downs, and then taking our experiences and making the most out of them and becoming the people that we want to become, and to make use those experiences as gifts to serve people around us, and to, just like I said, live the most exciting and wonderful lives that we possibly can live.
I love that. I love that. And I wanted to just reinforce the hormonal thing. We actually, in one of our clinical trials, I'm not sure if I told you this ever, Cody, but we looked at various different hormones. We looked at DHEA, cortisol, prolactin, homocysteine, which is actually an amino acid, but which they all are amino acids in their base. But essentially what we showed was that, because those are standard, even prolactin. So there's certain hormones that they've done a lot of research on that they've shown respond to how we manage stress. And you can't look at them in isolation. You've got to look at them in the big picture of everything. So there's no one biomarker. I just want to stress that. But and then obviously also, I didn't look directly at the female hormones, but DHEA is the base hormone that forms all the other hormones. So it does tell us a lot. And what we see is that people that are very stressed out, they don't have sufficient DHEA, they have too much cortisol, so it's the wrong ratio. And prolactin, which we associate with breastfeeding moms, is actually a hormone that males and females have throughout the entire lifespan, just different amounts at different times. And it's incredibly sensitive to how we are managing our mindsets and so on. And also things like homocysteine, which is very linked to prolactin. So what we found is that at the beginning of our clinical trial, when people were very, very unmanaged in their minds, so our brain is changing every day because our mind is changing every day. Our body is changing every day because our mind is changing every day. Every moment of every day, you're never the same. So my contention is always when people say 63 days, a lot of work, your mind's changing anyway. So in 63 days' time, if you never do anything that I'm saying, you have changed, but in what direction? Have you controlled the direction? So to be empowered to direct change is massive in our lives. And that's very, very, that autonomy is very empowering. So what we saw with the research at the beginning at day one, and then we went all the way through different time points, day 63, we did a repeat day 63 days up to 6 months. And we've done a lot of studies since. But essentially, we saw massive changes in the hormones in 9 weeks slots. So, for example, prolactin, which was too low in some people, too high in other people. You don't want to be too low or too high. You want to be too ideal for your age and so on. And that normalized within 9 weeks. And it hadn't normalized for years for these people. And, prolactin that's abnormal for long periods of time will affect all your hormones. And it will affect your sleep. It will affect your sexual functioning. It just pretty boomerangs. Same thing with the DHEA. If that's too low, or the ratio with cortisol's off, et cetera, et cetera. So we found in 9 weeks, I didn't do any supplementation. We did pure mind management using the Neurocycle app. Those levels normalized. And, I'm a great believer in taking the correct kind of supplements. And that's why I believe in Mixhers and I believe in taking this kind of thing, because your physical brain and body take a battering every day. So your mind is doing the majority of the work, but we need to use our mind to actually also be wise in what we put into our body and consume in our body. So something like Mixhers is fantastic because it is a way of us putting good stuff in our body so that our mind can work through good substance and just facilitates the process. And just one more thing about that is if our mindsets are right, you will get, and I'm using your example because people are familiar with Mixhers and what you do, but your hormones and whatever supplement you take to facilitate and improve your functioning, if your mind's not right, you will lose a massive percentage of the benefit. So you may get an immediate benefit, but your long-term benefit's not there. And research has shown you can lose in the high 80s% benefit from something good, like a good supplement or like a good, something like Mixhers and so on. You can lose if your mind, so it's a great supplement. There's nothing wrong with, but if your mind's not right, you don't get the full benefit. So mind first, you have to manage your mind so that you can get the benefit of all the other great stuff we can do.
I love that. And I appreciate you talking about Mixhers as well. But yeah, this is exactly, just to bring this home, this is why I have this podcast is, yes, I want all of us to have the right nutrients in our body because those nutrients are the building blocks. But if we look at the 3 main root causes of hormone imbalance, it's that nutrient deficiency. That's absolute. We also have maybe poor detoxification pathways and issues with that. But it's also chronic stress and how our body is handling the stress that's being given to us. And so what Dr. Leaf is sharing with us today is going to help in that area as well, because it all is connected. And so these are some good strategies for us to be able to manage our mental mess and manage the stress in our lives so that physically we can feel our best. Our hormones will feel balanced. Everything will be running as it should. And so I just think it's beautiful. And I just have loved this conversation and everything that you have shared. You've been so generous. Thank you so much.
Of course. No, thank you so much. It's been great. It's always lovely talking to you. And I look forward to talking again and connecting again soon.
I hope so. I appreciate you. All right, girls, if you enjoyed this episode, and I know you did, please share it with the girls in your life, because sharing is caring and we all could use a little extra support. This episode has felt very empowering to me, and I hope you have felt the same. Until next week, I hope you all have a very happy and healthy week. We'll talk soon. Bye.